What is up, everyone? Today we have yet another awesome sci-fi movie for you guys, so strap in and let's get started. Our movie starts with a monologue about how Earth's nations stopped fighting each other and decided to band together to explore space. Their plan is to build a hypergate, a device that can help them travel far deep into space and explore the vastness of the galaxy to find a planet with drinkable water and breathable air. But a terrorist organization by the name of the Global Sedition aims to stop them from achieving their goals. Will they succeed? Will they fail? Let's find out together, shall we? Our first scene opens with Major Don West attempting to stop the Sedition forces from blowing up the hyperspace. Major West and his partner Jeb engage in a space fight with enemy forces. In the process, Major West takes out some of the starfighters, but his partner gets hit. In order to keep his partner's ship that's spiraling towards the hyperdrive from crashing, Major West pulls a very dangerous stunt and saves him. Our next scene takes us to John Robinson, and we see him explaining how he will travel with his family for 10 years until they reach Alpha Prime. This mission is of the utmost importance to mankind, as human beings now need to colonize another planet because Earth is dying. And in 2 decades, Earth is not going to be a hospitable place for human life. In a few years after the hypergate is completed, not everybody needs to spend 10 years like Robinson and his family to reach Alpha Prime, and they can just use the hypergate to reach Alpha Prime instantaneously. Robinson is quite pleased with the dedication he gave his work, and he's very happy about traveling to Alpha Prime for the sake of mankind. But his family doesn't really share that sentiment, especially his teenage daughter Penny. John crosses paths with Major Don West. Since the original captain that was supposed to pilot Jupiter 2 died because he was assassinated by the Global Sedition, Major Don now has to take his place. Our next scene takes us to Dr. Smith, a spy for the Global Sedition that executed the first captain that was supposed to fly Jupiter 2. Dr. Smith now has to sabotage Jupiter 2 and kill the Robinson family before they're able to colonize Alpha Prime. Dr. Smith is not only a spy for the Global Sedition, but he's also the Robinsons' family doctor. But little did the Robinsons know, Dr. Smith was not only just there to administer penicillin, he's there to keep his enemy close. It's now one day until they launch, and here we meet Judy, John's oldest daughter, who also works on the ship. That night, after they check the ship to launch tomorrow, John goes back home and gets into an argument with his wife. You see, John is a very busy man, and it's here we understand that that's taken a toll on his family life, and he barely pays attention to anything that really happens to his family. This is especially true for Will, who is John's youngest son. Will is an incredibly bright boy who just wants to prove himself to his father, but his father never seems to want to spend any time with him. Next, we see Dr. Smith sneaking aboard Jupiter 2 and sabotaging the ship and reprogramming a helper robot to destroy the Robinson family hours after they've gone into cryosleep. As he was sneaking out of the ship just before it launches, his superior gives him a call, and after he made sure that he's done what he was supposed to do, his superior betrays him by sending signals and overloading a communication device Dr. Smith uses to communicate with the Global Sedition. And before he can make it out of the ship, the device electrocutes him and he gets knocked out unconscious inside the vents. When Dr. Smith regains consciousness, the ship was already in space, and the Robinson family, including Major Don, have went into cryosleep. And suddenly, the robot he reprogrammed to kill the Robinsons as they sleep activates since his timer was up and goes to kill the Robinsons. But what Dr. Smith did not take into consideration is the fact that he would be on the ship as the robot tears it down to bits. So, in order to save his own skin, Dr. Smith tries to wake the Robinson family prematurely from their cryosleep. The family wakes up, but they're feeling really groggy, and Major Don and John try to stop the robot from destroying everything, but they fail. And just before the robot manages to destroy the Robinsons, Will steps in and manages to hack the robot remotely. After the chaos with the robot was over, Major Don finds Dr. Smith, and from the burn mark on Dr. Smith's hand, he realizes that he worked for the Global Sedition. But before Major Dawn throws him off the ship, Dr. Smith bargains for his life in return for Judy's. Judy was still stuck in her pod and she was still asleep and running out of oxygen. And Dr. Smith, since he's a doctor, promises to save her but makes Major Dawn promise not to kill him if he does so. This wasn't the only problem that the Robinsons were facing. Since the robot destroyed the navigation panel, the ship was way off course and heading toward the sun. The gravitational pull of the sun was so strong that Jupiter 2 could not evade it. And just before they were literal toast, Major Dawn comes up with an idea. And his idea is to go through the sun into hyperspace. And even though John doesn't really like this idea, just before they crash into the sun and burn, they go into hyperspace and they come out the other end many light years away. As soon as they make sure that they're not crashing into the sun anymore, John goes to the medical bay to check on his daughter Judy, who was unconscious. Dr. Smith actually did his job and Judy's completely fine, but now they don't really know where they are and they're lost in space. After making sure his daughter is okay, John confronts Dr. Smith and locks him in the medical bay. The Robinsons and Major Dawn try to salvage what they have left and make some manual repairs to the ship to get it back up and running. And a bit later, they notice a hole in space, and through this hole, there's this giant ship. They fly toward it to check for any survivors, and they notice that it's actually a ship from Earth. And alongside this abandoned ship, the Proteus, there's an alien ship unlike anything they've ever seen before. They decide to go inside and inspect the ship, and they also take Dr. Smith with them because you don't want to leave a saboteur behind on your ship. Will also sends his robot with them that he now controls with his remote. On the ship, it looks completely abandoned, but they find a bunch of biological matter and some goo. In the control center, John tries to do his best to bring up the captain's log, and even though the footage wasn't really pretty, the video log of the captain comes on, and the captain is apparently Jeb, Major Dawn's best friend and partner. This is incredibly confusing to everyone because they've only gone missing for a day, and Jeb looks a lot older, and in the video, it's him attempting to search for Major Dawn because he went missing. This video of Jeb almost makes it look like the Robinsons didn't actually travel through hyperspace, they traveled through time. The captain's log is not the most confusing and weirdest thing that they encounter on the ship. They also find this alien chameleon monkey that changes colors every time it touches a different object. But before they could disentangle everything and get to the bottom of what's really going on, alien spiders attack. And with the help of Major Dawn's combat abilities and Will's fighter robot, they managed to make it back to Jupiter 2. But before they made it out, one of the spiders actually scratched Dr. Smith in the back. I was hoping that one of these spiders has some kind of venom and kills Dr. Smith, but apparently not. And even though John and the rest of the team made it back to Jupiter 2, the alien spiders don't stop their attack. They actually regroup and try to break into Jupiter 2. And Maureen, John's wife, figures out that the spiders are actually attracted to heat and light. Using this useful information, Major Dawn activates Proteus's engines, and the spiders all move back to the Proteus attracted by the heat of the engine. And since Major Dawn was trained as a combat agent, he never leaves an enemy stronghold intact. And so, he explodes the Proteus and the alien spiders before he flies away in Jupiter 2. The explosion from the Proteus pushes Jupiter 2 to crash on a nearby planet. Their core material, the thing that they use as fuel to power Jupiter 2, has almost run out. And now they don't have enough fuel for the ship to exit this planet. Stranded on an inhabitable planet, the crew tries to make do with what they have and also come up with ideas to escape this planet. In the morning, they detect a radioactive substance that could potentially serve as fuel for Jupiter 2. But this radioactive substance is in the middle of this bubble that seems to affect time. Looking at the bubble's integrity and how it behaves, John figures out that it's actually a time-traveling bubble, and it's the same kind of bubble that they saw in space before they got inside the Proteus. The time-traveling idea that John posited seems to make a lot of sense, and as you pass through these time bubble, let's call them, you get to actually experience a future that hasn't actually taken place yet. That explains the existence of the Proteus far away from Earth and everything they saw inside the ship. After noticing how fast this time bubble is expanding, John also figures out that the bubble is going to destroy the planet really soon. And so, he decides to go inside the bubble with Major Dawn and retrieve the radioactive material before the planet explodes. Inside the bubble, John and Major Dawn discover something incredibly odd. They find a fragment of Jupiter 2, but it's as if this fragment is decades old. As they were trying to figure out what's really going on, someone shoots Major Dawn in the back. John tries to counterattack the shooter, but the shooter, who is actually a robot, shoots at him and John hits his head and falls unconscious. When he comes to, John finds himself inside this ship that looks destroyed, and he sees a man that looks kind of like him but is not really him. He asks the man where he is and what this place is, and the man tells him that this is actually Jupiter 2. And the strange man also tells him that he's actually his son Will. Since they're inside the time bubble, they're actually inside a reflection of Will's future. And in this future, everybody's dead except for Will. And the radioactive substance that they detected and were looking for is actually the same thing that Will made to time travel back to the past and stop his father from ever embarking on the journey. As all of this was happening, Dr. Smith has actually tricked Will into sneaking out of the ship in search of his father. And as adult Will was explaining everything that happened to his father, Dr. Smith has tricked Will again and taken his gun away from him and brings young Will to where John and Major Dawn were. He holds everybody at gunpoint and reprograms a robot adult Will had to target everybody but him. His plan is to use the time machine that adult Will made to save his family for himself. And as he attempts to use the time machine that only works for one person, adult Will starts laughing at him. When Dr. Smith asks him why he's laughing, Will tells him to look around and asks him if one person could do all of this on their own. And as soon as Will said that, a very tall and hideous looking creature attacks Dr. Smith from behind. And this incredibly grotesque being is apparently Dr. Smith himself, but in the future. How did this happen, you may ask? It seems as though the alien spider scratch that Dr. Smith got just a day ago has poisoned him, and he turns into this creature in the future. And after everybody else died, Dr. Smith was able to survive on this harsh planet because of his new biology. And since him and Will were the only survivors, Dr. Smith helped him develop the time traveling machine, and he became the father that Will never had. And Spider-Smith saw the error of his ways, and he hates what he used to be in the past. And that's why he attacks the human Smith and throws him inside his pit. But when he orders the robot to kill the guys, adult Will intervenes and stops him. After a little while, adult Will starts to contemplate what Spider-Smith was monologuing about just a few hours ago. And he asks Spider-Smith what really happened that day his mother and his sisters died. And after a confrontation, adult Will figures out that Spider-Smith was actually using him to build the time machine so he can escape himself. And because now he's some kind of mutated alien spider, not only is he just time traveling back to Earth, he's time traveling there to destroy humanity by laying a bunch of eggs that will hatch into alien spiders that kill everyone. And as Spider-Smith again was monologuing his evil plan to adult Will, the actual tiny Will has somehow managed to override the robot that was keeping an eye on them, and him and Major Dawn have escaped and they were making their way back to Jupiter 2. John stayed behind to get the radioactive material that they need as fuel, and he sent Major Dawn back because Major Dawn can actually fly the spacecraft and John cannot. Meanwhile, Spider-Smith, who no longer needs adult Will, was about to kill him until John gets there and they start fighting. John tries to do his best, but he gets overwhelmed by Spider-Smith. And even though he was no match for the giant spider that Dr. Smith is now, he managed to cut him on the abdomen, and the spider eggs that he was holding start hatching immediately and devour Spider-Smith because these spiders devour their wounded. And so we say bye-bye to Spider-Smith as he gets devoured by his own children and falls inside the energy reactor of the time machine. At this point, young Will and Major Dawn have made it back to Jupiter 2, and Dawn tells Maureen that John sacrificed himself for his family, and even though they don't have enough fuel, they must try to fly out of the planet because it's about to explode. But as Major Dawn tries to break atmosphere, a giant asteroid comes hurling at their spaceship and destroys it. And John watches from the ground as his family burns to death. Here, adult Will notices just how much his father cared about his family. Because of this, adult Will changes his mind about traveling years into the past and sends his father just a few moments back in time on the ship before it exploded. And John takes command of the ship and instructs Major Dawn not to try to break atmosphere, but go through the planet's core and use the gravity to propel them into space. And by the skin of their teeth, they manage to escape the exploding planet. But right before they could celebrate, the planet's gravitational field collapses and pulls Jupiter too. But now, being pulled by a heavy gravitational pull is not their first rodeo, and they do the same thing they did as they were about to crash into the sun, and they use the gravitational pull, activate their hyperdrive, and target to go to Alpha Prime. And the movie ends with Jupiter 2 disappearing into space, headed towards Alpha Prime. And that is how our movie comes to an end. I was hoping that they leave Dr. Smith stranded on that planet, but Major Dawn does knock him out, and that was pleasing enough for me. Anyways, make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you on my next recap. Bye.